Welcome to Creative Tian channel. Today we are going to look at several different edge stitches to stop the curl of the stockinette stitches. The stockinette stitches curl naturally. It curls on both left and right side and also top and bottom. I'm going to focus on the side stitches today, but the same technique can apply to the top and bottom. And we are going to use hand manipulation on the LK150 knitting machine. And the first one is a seed stitch, or you can use moss stitch. And in machine knitting, the seed stitch can be reformed by hand. So we drop a stitch, drop one stitch, and use your latch tool. I place it one stitch below, undo the stitch, and then hook it back and hand it back to the needle. That's one stitch reformed. And then I will do it every other stitch. So this one, drop it, and hold your latch tool here so it doesn't drop too low, and then reform it back. You can reform as many stitches as you like. I think 3 will be a nice edge for like a blanket or a scarf. So do one more. And I can do the same on the right side. Reform the stitch, every other stitch. The seed stitch is alternating the knit and purl stitches, but for machine knitting, if you want to keep it simple, it's easier to have one row transforming and one row of plain knitting. The next row will be transforming stitches again, but we will be transforming the stitches in between the previous transforming rows. So we transform some stitches here, the second, fourth, and sixth from the edge, and we'll knit one row. And then now we are going to transform the third stitch, fifth, and the seventh stitches. Or you can just do third and fifth. So I start with the third stitch. We'll drop this stitch. Reform the stitch and place it back to the needle. That's the third, fourth, and then we do fifth. It's easier to insert the latch tool first before you drop the stitch. And then skip one stitch and the next one. And it's the same on the left side. I start with the third stitch here. Fifth. Now it's all transformed. We can knit one more plain row and then repeat the same transform stitch as my first transforming rows. Now we go back to the second, fourth, and sixth needles. Drop it. The same on the right side. And as you can see, this is a little bit tedious because you have to hand reform the purl stitches. And we will just keep continuing these 2 rows. I will knit 1 row and then transfer the 3rd, 5th, and the 7th stitches. I did a few rows here so you can see this is the back side. The second way is to do the garter stitch. So similar to the seed stitch, you have to do hand manipulation for all the purl stitches. Since the garter stitch is 1 row of knit and 1 row of purl, so again we can use a latch tool to reform every other row. So 1 row without reforming and 1 row reforming all the edge stitches. So first we will knit 2 rows. These 2 rows will both be knit stitches, so we do have to hand transfer our edge stitches. I have 7 edge stitches on each side, so I'm going to hand transform it into purl stitches. And I'm going to leave the outermost stitch not transformed, so it will have a consistent look. It's up to you if you want to transform the edge stitch. So I start from the 2nd stitch, transform and hand it back. The 3rd one, drop the stitch, transform and hand back. The same on the right side. I'll leave the outermost stitch and start from the 2nd one. Now we finish transforming this row. We will knit 2 rows. And then we'll repeat transforming the 7 stitches again. So we'll just keep repeating transforming stitch and knit 2 rows. That's how we make garter stitch. The 3rd stitch to stop the curl is to do a ribbing. And again, we have to do hand manipulation on LK 150. If you have a ribber and a standard gauge or bulky gauge, you can do the ribbing with a ribber. So we are just going to do the basic 1x1 ribbing. To do the 1x1 ribbing, we transfer every other stitch, and every row we transfer the same stitch. So you will create a column. You will see the lines. Here I'm going to start with the 2nd stitch. And then the 4th stitch. And then the 6th. We'll do the same on the right side. Transform the 2nd. And we will repeat the same. Every row we have to transform the same stitches. For the ribbing, it doesn't have to be 1x1. You can do 1x2, 2x2, 3x3. There's no limit. You just have to make a sample and see which way you like it. Next one, we will make a cable stitch on the edges. So that will also make the edge more sturdy and less curl. You can use 3x3 cable or 3x2 or 2x2. So depends on how big you want your cable to be. you can adjust it. Here I'm going to use a 3x3 cable, and first I will need a few rows. Now I have a few rows of plain stitches. I will start my cable crossing, and it's very easy. You just pull out the needle so the stitches are behind the ledge, and then push back in so the ledge is closed, and then keep going and pick up the stitches. And the same on the left side. Pull out all the way and then push in, and then now you have stitches on the transferring tool, and we just switch, and you can do it either way. It can be right on the top or the left side on the top. It will just be a different look from the front side. And I will keep it consistent. I always like to start from the right needle to the left side. It's just a habit. And it's easier to pull all the needle out so you don't drop stitch easily for the next row. And we'll do the same on the left side. Cross, place it back to the needle, place it back to the needle on the right. Now we finish the crossing. We have to decide how many rows you want before the next crossing. Since I have 4 before I cross it, so I will do 8 rows. Now I will do my cable crossing. We do it the same way. And then we need 8 rows again and do the next crossing. And we'll just keep repeating 8 rows and cable crossing. We'll do a few times and show you after it's off the machine. Here the first section is a plain stockinette stitch, so it kind of curl back. And we start to need a seed stitch or the modified seed stitch. We have 1 row of transforming every other stitch and 1 row of plain knitting. So this one is pretty flat. The next one we have garter stitch, but you can see I need 1 extra row so it doesn't look right. So I need the garter stitch again at the end, and you can see both front and back are the same. It's the garter stitch. It's just transforming every second row into purl stitches. And after that we have cable stitches. You can see it creates an interesting texture, and it's more flat. It doesn't have that curled edge. Here's the back side. And you can adjust the size of the cable stitch to match your project. The next one is the ribbing. I did the 1x1 ribbing, so it's 1 column of knit stitch, 1 column of purl. It's supposed to be very stretchy, and it should be identical from the back side. So those are hand manipulated stitches you can use to stop the edge curl of the stockinette stitches. Thank you so much for watching today, and happy knitting!